I get a chance to talk to our staff at any point, I always try to make this reference. And if you're not this kind of person, you need to think about it. Be the teacher, or the program assistant, or the job coach, or whatever you are, you would want your kids, or your grandkids, or your nieces or nephews to have. Be that teacher. Be that program assistant. Be that job coach. Our kids deserve it. Our community expects it. So, you know, when we talk about high expectations in Warwick County, you know, that's what we want. We want our teachers and our staff members to be the very best that they can be. And we want you to think of it like this. If your kid was sitting in your class, would you be glad for them to be sitting in there? Okay? And then I'll leave you with one final. These are all extra credit at the end, so make sure you remember these. Kids have to know that you care before they care what you know. Kids have to know that you care before they care what you know. And that goes, again, whether it's 3rd grade, 7th grade, high school, those of you that are in extracurricular activities, you know you get the most out of kids when they know that you care about them. The days of coming into a classroom and taking the knowledge that you have and giving it to the students and expecting them to receive it and take it in and learn it just because you're smart are over. That's not what we're dealing with anymore. You guys know that this is totally different from when we were in school. You have to engage kids. They have to know that you care before they're going to work for you. Cardinal principle in education should be, for everyone, find out where the students are and start there. Cardinal principle in education should be, find out where the students are and start there. And you know, and that goes, I don't care if you're teaching 3rd grade language arts, or 7th grade social studies, advanced placement English, you better find out where your students are. Because if you don't know where they are, then you naturally don't know where to start and where to take them. And so that should be the cardinal principle. So we're going to find out where you are in just a minute. We're going to take a pre-test here in just a few minutes and find out what you know about crisis intervention. These are the John Bertram rules. Any of you that have ever worked with John Bertram know that you need some sort of guidelines. How many of you have worked with John before and know him? Yeah, it can be tough, can't it? These are the due care participant rules. If you would, on page 3 in your handout, just read through those real quickly. And it's all about being careful and being safe while we're learning crisis intervention today. What's the objective of the class? What do we want you to leave here with? Care, welfare, safety, and security of all students. And so when you leave here today, you make sure that you at least have some knowledge in that area of care, welfare, safety, and security of students and staff. Students and staff. All right, on page 6, the manuals have changed. There should be, page 4, there should be a pre-test. We are cramming about 10 hours worth of instruction into 6, and so we'll move quickly. And so those of you that are type A, you may not like it. Those of you that are like me and like generalities and let's move, let's be quick, you will like it. And so for some of you, it won't be good. Maybe Kelly and Linda will be able to meet your needs a little better than I can instructionally. At the top of that pretest, put your name. That's it. We don't need anything else but your name. You don't have to fill anything else out. Does that make anybody nervous in here that you're not going to fill out? We have those type A personalities that say, well, why aren't we doing any? Just put your name on it. Do we need the date? No, you don't need the date. Just put your name on it. It's your book.
Gotta have a baseline.
All right, now take a few minutes and look through this pre-test and try to complete this pre-test the best that you can. We're going to find out where you guys are.
development model. You want to, yeah, there you go. The first level, behavior level in crisis development is the anxiety level.
To help this along, you do not have to write those definitions out, okay? There may be a place in your workbook for them, but as long as you get the diagram and what she's giving you, that's the main focus. You will see this diagram again.
So these are kind of the levels that you will see your students kind of go through. Now, it's important to know they don't always go in the order that's written on this chart, but these are the levels that we see in students. So the first level is the anxiety level, which they define it as a noticeable increase or change in behavior. And they give some examples of things you might see a student doing who's in the crisis, in the anxiety level. Pacing, finger drumming, wringing their hands, staring. And what's important to note is you have to know your students, because every student's going to be different. And so if you know your students well, then you're going to notice that little, even small changes. So can you guys think of some specific things that you've seen in your classrooms with your students that would indicate that they may be in this anxiety level that isn't listed on here? Crying, yes. Tears, yes.
I get like some grunt.
Grunting, growling, yep. See that?
Pacing.
Pacing, yep.
I have somebody who breaks things into little pieces, erasers or pencils.
Okay. Whining. Tearing paper, yep.
I've got a student that will give just a obvious verbal sigh, you know,
Okay.
to try to draw attention.
Right.
You know.
And probably you notice some things yourself. I mean, all of us, when we're feeling anxious, do some things. If I have a paper clip in my hand in a case conference meeting, it's going to be broken, because it's just an anxiety. It's just kind of a little bit anxious, and I kind of have to do something and fiddle with my fingers. And so we all kind of show some signs in that early stages of anxiety. And so our approach, the staff approach at the anxiety level, is that we're to be supportive at that time. And supportive can look different, but they define it as an empathic, a non-judgmental approach attempting to alleviate anxiety. So you're just gonna maybe go to them. A lot of times I'll get down on their level at a safe distance. We'll go through that later this afternoon. You know, hey, what's going on? And this is where you need to know your students too. You know, if you know a student is maybe going to be physically aggressive, you may not want to be all, hey, buddy, what's up? You know, but, you know, taking your distance and getting on their level, eye to eye, and saying, hey, what can I do? You know, what kind of things can I do to help you talk through this? And a lot of times, that's what it takes to kind of start. You know, you can stop it right there at the anxiety level before it escalates at all. Where unfortunately, sometimes as teachers, we've got 30 students and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you're on them, hey, I thought I told you to get out your book and get your paper ready, and you're kind of in that mode, and you can take that kid on to the next level pretty quickly, or onto the, you know, skip all the way and they go off, you know, physically. So the second stage is the defensive level. They describe this as the beginning stage of loss of rationality. So it's beginning to ramp up a little bit. At this stage, an individual often becomes belligerent and challenges authority. Anybody ever had a kid challenge your authority? What does that look like in your classrooms?
I get told that I'm not the boss. He's the boss.
Oh yeah, you're not the boss of me.
You're not my mom.
You're not my mom. Anything else?
You're not the teacher.
Yeah. Program assistants.
That's a great point.
Yes. A lot of times students don't have the respect that they should for a program assistant. Anything else? Sometimes it's just a refusal. You know, I'm not going to do what you're telling me to do. You can't make me.
I'm just ignoring.
Ignoring you.
How about our ED classes? It's not my fault, I didn't do it. Right, you get some of that? Denial.
Yep. Okay, so with that approach, that's when we're gonna be directive. An approach in which a staff member takes control of a potentially escalating situation. So we're gonna take, that's kind of when we're setting limits for the kiddos. Hey, you have a shot here. Let's, you got this much time. When I come back, I expect you to have this done, and let's get going, and then the consequence of what could happen, setting limits. And we're gonna talk more about setting limits in a little while. The next stage.
Draw a line right there, but after 2, because when you get into that next stage, now you're talking about, you've gone from verbal to physical, okay? And now you have acting out.
And something that's important to mention is this little line up here. It's called integrated experience. So what that means is, basically, you notice there's an arrow going both ways. So how we react to them kind of depends on how they're going to react to us, right? So, if we come at them with a supportive stance and with a supportive, talking back and forth, then maybe we're not going to get to this acting out person. However, if we don't, then, it could go the other way pretty quickly. And sometimes it will anyway.
I want to, yeah, Mac.
I was just gonna say directive is, when I think of directive, I always give them an option, you have this choice, this is choice A and this is choice B, you're gonna make the choice, so, is that, when you
Yes.
say directive,
That can fall right in there.
And
That's
we'll talk
exactly
about,
right.
we'll talk about exactly that here in a little while, Matt, setting limits, and that's exactly how you give the student a choice, so they feel like they have a way out, but their choices are limits that are productive for
what
them.
you want.
Yeah, what you want out of the situation. That's a great point.
And I want to take a second here to say something that we haven't really talked too much about yet, which is, you want to remember that what we're doing today is crisis prevention, which is very different than behavior modification. Okay? So you may have a kid who is not a crisis kid. So I want to be clear that you don't confuse what we're talking about today, which is going into a crisis where we have the potential for dangerous behavior. Okay? I don't want to confuse that with the student that you need to go, I said sit down now, and the kid goes, oh crap, I'm in trouble. Okay, so we're not talking about those kids. We're talking about students and adults, if necessary, when we enter a crisis model. And so throughout the course of the day, some of you, especially our special educators, may struggle a bit going, well, but if I do that, the kid's getting their way, okay? Because you're going to be thinking about behavior modification. And you want to remember what we're talking about right now is crisis intervention, not behavior modification. If you have a student who you're doing this regularly with, on a frequent basis, and you feel like that is adding to that student's behavior problem, then you should have somebody have done a functional behavior assessment and a behavior plan for that, okay? This is for crisis, not behavior modification. They don't belong in the same basket whatsoever. They're very, very different. Now, we may have a student who needs behavior modification and crisis management, but today we're talking about crisis. We're talking about dangerous situations. So I just want to make that really clear, because otherwise you may get confused as we go through the day a little bit. We come back to our parenting thing and we go, well, yeah, but then he's getting his way. Well, if we've got a kid who the choice is, I may let him have his way so nobody gets stabbed, I may let that student have their way and deal with the behavior part of that later to get through the crisis so that nobody gets hurt. Because safety is more important always than changing a behavior. We can talk about how to change that behavior later. Does that make sense to everybody? We're really staying with crisis model today.
I had a hard time with that when I was sitting where you are, because I felt like my classroom management was very good. I felt like I was on top of things. I thought I used my voice well. I thought I had very good command of the classroom. But that's different. That's different. If I if Linda calls me when I was principal at Oakdale, and she's in a crisis, and I come in and I think me raising my voice and saying, sit down and close your mouth, in the middle of a crisis is the right thing to do, it's not. And I learned that the hard way with ED students. And God bless our ED teachers and staff, because there's this line that they try to stay on between classroom management, crisis intervention, to how firm can I be, how much can I let go? Because if they don't keep, maybe a balance is a better way of saying this, a balance between classroom management and crisis intervention, guess what? You can have an out-of-control classroom because your management's not good, or you can have a lot of crisis because you are creating that with bad classroom management. Do you see how they kind of balance each other? And so, you know, guys like Mo, program assistants in life skills classrooms, ED classrooms, and those teachers, in my opinion, our ED teachers do a great job of that. I'm not sure I could do it because of my classroom management was more like, hey, sit down, close your mouth. You know, we're not doing this. And right or wrong, that's where it was. And we have learned a lot about that over the last 20 years since I've been out of the classroom. So anyway. So if this is hard for you, I get it, because it was hard for me. Well,
Will we get into some specifics on behavior modification?
yeah, we can definitely talk about, not in this setting, but we can definitely sit down, especially since you work in an ED classroom, if you have specifics, you know, what should I do in this situation? Both Linda and Kelly are great resources for that.
And Mo, for you today, specifically for our ED folks especially, or if you have a student that you're really having a challenge with, you may make notes about this throughout the course of the day about that particular student or those particular things. And then and don't hesitate to ask those questions today, but we'll tell you that belongs in the philosophy of today, or that belongs in a different conversation, and then we will get together and address that as a behavior modification technique later if it doesn't belong today. And that has happened a lot out of these. People have come out of this going, you know, gosh, we're really handling this situation as a crisis, and we're really not changing this student's behavior. We need to have a meeting, we need a functional behavior assessment done on this student, and we need a better behavior plan. And that's one of the nice things that can come out of this today as well, is for you to realize maybe you're, you know, managing a behavior, but we're not changing a behavior. So make notes about that, and we absolutely can do that as follow-up to this as well.
And just to piggyback on what you said, a student who is in crisis is not capable of really making that connection of behavior modification in the crisis moment anyway. So even if you feel like you're standing your ground and because you don't want him to learn this behavior is okay, he's not learning anything in this crisis mode. Once he's hit crisis, he's not learning anything at that point anyway. So you can kind of...
Yeah, the learning and the behavior part takes place prior to the crisis and after the crisis, and not during the crisis. Because you have to remember, and we're going to talk about that a little later, about the loss of rationality and all of that occurs during a crisis, that we're trying to be rational with kids who are irrational and expecting them to respond rationally.
Because that's what we said, in the defensive mode, they've already lost rationality. So trying to rationalize with them is not going to work at that point anyway. So then we enter the acting out to the level of acting out person. And that is when the kid has lost complete control, and it often results in a physical acting out episode. So that's with the first hit, the first punch, the first attempt at a punch. Wow. And our approach is nonviolent physical crisis intervention, which we are going to set the whole afternoon apart to work on that and learn more about that. It is the safe, non-harmful control and restraint positions used to safely control an individual until he can regain control of his behavior. And you'll notice that they are only utilized as a last resort. So when the student is going to harm themselves or harm others.
You might want
make
to
a note of that.
Yeah.
You'll see that again.
That last sentence there.
As a last resort, when they're going to harm themselves or others. You'll see that again.
When should nonviolent crisis physical intervention be used? Not that we're teaching to the test or anything, but we are.
We're checking for understanding. Put a thumbs up if you know access intervention should, those of you that are teachers, this is outside because I haven't done it before, man. I walk into a classroom now, you got that student engagement thing going, and those checks for understanding and exit tickets and things. I've got to create an exit ticket for that. How many of you know what an exit ticket is? See that? Yeah. So,
Exit tickets and Tucker sign and everything.
exit tickets, I need to create an exit ticket for this class, and that's how you guys, at break, in order to go to break, you have to be able to tell me the 2 ways that kids could, we won't do it.
To ensure the care, welfare, safety, and security. You guys know it.
You might need to know that too.
Yeah, you might.
In pins.
There used to be a sign in here, a cheat sheet.
I know,
but
somebody
took it down. So
I was
you don't
disappointed.
have that visual aid this time. And finally, the last stage is the tension reduction stage. This is when they're starting to calm down. It's a decrease in physical and emotional energy that occurs after a person has acted out, characterized by the regaining of rationality. So any of you who have gone through the physical part of it, what do you see with your kiddos during the tension reduction stage?
Crying.
Crying, a lot of times crying. Anybody else?
Relaxing.
Just kind of completely relaxed. I had students that would fall asleep. They would fall asleep because, I mean, it's not only physical, but emotionally, it's just draining.
Apologizing. Anybody, you get that, don't you, Lindsay? I mean, some of our, they're not rational when they're going through this crisis and they're calling Linda and me everything and, all sorts of profane names. And when it's over, Miss Powell, I'm so sorry I called you. And so, and when you're in the restraint in the old days, literally, you're in that physical restraint and you almost feel it go out of their body. I mean, you almost just feel them relax. And of course, these are young kids. I mean, they would, you're in a basket hold, which we won't teach here today. That's just specific to some situations. And you just feel their head go back on your chest or shoulder, and you go, okay, they're gonna calm down. And
Luke, you get that a lot now, don't you? You feel that?
Yeah, he likes to lean his head back and
Yeah,
just.
I'm done, and just kind of sinks in.
sometimes though, don't get confused because that's, I went to the hospital with a hand bit because we went here, I relaxed, and the teacher, we don't call that therapeutic rapport, what do we call that? Processing? Processing, at the end we process. So the teacher's processing and she said something that he went back from tension reduction to acting out like that, because those are fluid. You can go from anxiety all the way to acting out. You don't have to have the defensive part. I mean, or for some of us that are in ED rooms, you may just go straight to acting out and you have no idea what happened. But I relaxed and his head came right down on my hand, and so trying to use your strength to get out of there. Go
And
ahead.
ED kids are pretty sneaky. If you don't know that about ED kids, they can fake you out and make you think that they're in that stage and they're not. And so you kind of relax and then they're ready to go. So you've got to always be on guard.
Yeah, good point.
So, and then, we pretty well described the therapeutic rapport. Just establishing that communication, letting them know, hey, it's a new start, we're starting over, you're a great kid, let's make some good choices, and, let's start over.
Brandy, you had your hand up.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I had a child in first grade, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and he would act out quite frequently. And we had to restrain him a lot and get Mr. Harrison and the principal down, and they would have to take him to the timeout room, and that was the only way to get him to get back to where he was. But he was not remorseful when he was done because he didn't remember much of anything that he did.
Great point. Yeah, we get that a lot too. I mean, the student is just so lost. There's so much adrenaline and emotion going that we would have them look at the green sheet. We call it the green sheet. It's a behavior management sheet at the end. And students would say, I did that. I did that. And then they would apologize. Yeah.
All right, so how can I give
there. So our first exercise for today is we're gonna have this side over here, walk towards you folks. And when you think that that is close, and when Farrell Butter, you're like, dude, he's really, stop, right there, that's close enough. When these people are you're starting to make you a little bit uncomfortable, you put that hand out and you tell them to stop, all right? And then just sort of stop there, and we'll see what those distances are,
So
all
no
right?
cheating eye contact. They
Yeah,
have to make
eye contact, forward, eye to eye. Ready, and let's walk here. Okay.
Men are a little further away. Now, Luke was a little more comfortable with phone.
Okay, so kind of look up and down the line here a little bit, and you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, this is unlike the building principals, we don't have any huggers here, so that's good. I like to pick on the building administrators. But we sort of have a little bit of a variance here in distance, and Tad pointed out that you'll notice that sometimes the guys get stopped by the ladies just a little bit further away, all right? So each of us has sort of a distance we're comfortable with here with this. So let's back up and
Well, you guys can back up, but let me add too, that this Farrell's height really represents the difference between what you would have in a student. And so if Tiffany, is a student, imagine a preschool, we think we might be helping a student by getting all up in here, but really, you don't know, if you don't know that student real well, you may be putting yourself in a situation where, it could become physical. And probably because of Farrell's height, and the same way with a student, you're approaching them, they don't know you very well. Well, wait a minute. But we have a tendency to think because we're the adult, we're in charge, we're gonna get right down here and talk to them. Not always the best move.
And if we had the time to do this, but we don't because of our time constraints, we would talk a little bit about, how does that make you feel? There's something to be said about that. Well, with the exception of our height challenged staff in high schools and middle schools, for the most part, that's the presence that we bring to the little ones, is we're significantly larger than them. And so we just need to be aware of what's going on with our body as we're approaching somebody that we are taller or shorter than, and vice versa. If you were approaching this student, that's gonna change things for you, isn't it? Yes. I'm gonna restrain what? Really? So it's, we need to be aware of that, and that's that whole integrated experience that Linda was talking about, that everything that we do affects the student and everything the student does affects us. All right, same thing, we're gonna maintain eye contact, only this time you guys are the walkers, and you let them know when they're close enough, and let's get eye contact and walk. Oh, look, we almost had a hugger down here. All right, are you guys related or anything?
I think they teach together.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so again, we've got that. Now look at the space that as an average here. Look at the average distance here, right? It's a couple of feet. All right. Now do me one favor, you guys. All right, everybody, maintain eye contact again. And I would like you to take half a step forward.
Oh, gosh.
How's that feel? How's that feel? Huh? All right.
Hey, that anxiety level.
Step back. All right. Yeah, look, do you see what you did? You were like, well, I'm okay here, but when I got here, then you said step back, and I went, I need to be back here. Okay, so see, and that was just a teeny bit of discomfort for you getting close there, right? That wasn't like, I'm afraid this person's gonna bite my earlobe off or anything. That was just, this makes me a little uncomfortable. But when you backed up, look how much further back most of you went from that little teeny bit of discomfort. So imagine one of our students who's in crisis. They're scared, they're angry, they're whatever, and I'll pick on somebody shorter than me, and we come up to them and we go, what's wrong? How can I help you? And they're going, get out of my space. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about now proxemics, body postures, gestures, and all of that. You guys did a great job going back to your seats. People's personal space is different. We just learned that we were standing, but your personal space is also different for our students. And that is because it also entails what is belonging to them as well, right? So when I'm at my desk, my personal space might also include my backpack, which is on the floor here, and it might include my papers and my folder that I keep inside my desk. Okay, so this is my personal space. Don't come inside my personal space. That same student standing in line, are you following me to the camera? Good luck with that. All right, so follow the camera. So my personal space for that same student who at his desk, all of that was his personal space. When he's standing in line, now he has a new personal space, right? When he's at recess, now he has a new personal space. Our personal space changes as we move through our day and we move through our situations. But personal space is defined by the person, not by you. But it's what they consider to be your personal space. All right. Now, if you look at what we just did here in this exercise, the rule of thumb is most people's personal space here is about 1.5 to 3 feet. So let's just err on the side of caution and say that we're going to give kids 3 feet. Okay? And did you notice that most of you, when you got a little uncomfortable and you stepped back, most of you went just a little bit further than 3 feet, because that's just sort of the zone that we feel comfortable with in America. Now, that may be very different in other countries. So this summer, I made a trip, we made a trip to Mexico. Has anybody been to Mexico before? You guys been to Mexico before? So the first couple of days that we were in Mexico, I was getting really irritated. At how rude the people were. They were cutting in line, they were bumping, don't touch me. Okay? You have germs, you're sweaty, I don't like this. All right. It took me about 2.5 days. All right, see,
They were touching his hair.
My personal, don't touch my hair. All right, so my personal space, right? But it took me a couple of days before I figured out that I was the oddball. This wasn't a rude issue. Okay, this was my problem because my American personal space is very different than theirs, and I figured that out when we went to the soccer game that night. We went down to their big stadium thing there, and there were like 2,000 of these folks watching Mexico play Germany, I believe. So I think it was a big game. And they are like just like sardines, and that's fine with them. They're, you know, that personal space was a very different issue for them than it was for me, and that's when I kind of went, this is actually my problem, not their problem. This is not an issue of people being rude. They would, if I were to say somebody that was rude, they would probably look at me and be like, what was rude? So different cultural differences, right? So we need to be thinking about that with our students, that there may be certain things that change their proxemics and their personal space and their body postures and those things too. All right? All right. Factors that might affect personal space and how much I need: gender, size, and cultural background. Well, we already talked about the size issue, right? We talked about that from both perspectives, as a staff person and as a student, right? That changes. What are some other things that affect your personal space? Yeah. Personal experiences, absolutely. Can you give me maybe a few examples you might think of?
Maybe if a child has been abused, or if a man figure was maybe abusing, so a man came close.
Absolutely. Absolutely, good. And we may not know that, right? We might not know that about a student. So we may see, wow, what's up with this person? Just be aware. Think that reaction is outside the norm of what I would expect. Maybe there's something going on here that is affecting that person's proxemics. What else?
For me, it's smell. Like
Smell?
if a kid has an odor that's bad, it's hard for me.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I'm right there with you.
Okay, but yeah.
Yeah, Mexico was interesting for me. Yes.
I think too, just kind of the way you were raised. Some families are just closer and they hug a lot.
Yes.
And some families don't.
Absolutely. So the first time my wife went with me to a class reunion, and it was she didn't talk for like the first hour. She was just in culture shock, okay, because she's from a good little German family, and and we do this kind of thing, and I'm from an Italian family, and everybody up there is big, and they hug. You walk in and everybody hugs, and I went to school with people who, like, the guys would kiss each other on the cheek, and that would freak people out. I mean, she was just complete culture shock for her, because she was raised very differently than the way that I was raised. We were all big huggers and whatever, and that was just completely creeping her out to the ends of the earth. A very difference in cultural issue there too. There's a couple of other cultural ones we should talk about here, because it's affecting Warwick County a little bit here in the last couple of years, which is there's some cultural and religious differences in physical distance and proxemics and those sorts of things. Does anybody know what I'm talking about there? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, we have some religions where, for example, you have to be careful about physical contact with the females, because that's a big, big cultural and religious no-no for them. Okay, so we have to be aware of that can be a real problem. We have an eye contact differences in certain countries where the way that they use eye contact is very different than the way that we use eye contact in America. And we may misread that as something that it's not intended to be, or we may maintain eye contact with a student that causes them a great degree of discomfort because of their cultural background or because of their religious background. So we want to be careful about those things when we're thinking about that. We need to understand our kids. We got to know where they're coming from, or you can't really know that. The last thing, an invasion of an individual's personal space increases their anxiety, right? You felt that a little bit when you stepped closer together. Those of you that were on this line over here, when I said to this line, step 1 foot closer, you had already stopped the person. So that made you, when they stepped a little closer, they came into your zone, that made you a little bit more uncomfortable. This line over here, that person stopped you. You may have wanted to stop way back, I don't know. But the instructions were keep walking. Okay. So then I said, now get a little bit closer even, right? So again, the integrated experience, that was affecting both of you when that was going on. So you may be uncomfortable coming into that person's space, they may be uncomfortable with you coming into their space. Does anybody have any questions about proxemics?
And I'm gonna add that what I learned when I went through this course was not only does this apply at school, but it applies in a lot of situations. And you think about, not only with students, but the three of us sit in case conferences probably half to 2/3 of our day. And so it's not uncommon for me, because I'm not afraid to shake hands and to, you know, if I see a parent that we deal with all the time and, you know, I come up, hey, how you doing? You know, that may not be the best way to greet that parent, you know, and so I have to be very careful with that, because I am somebody that would, you know, even with Kelly yesterday, we're in the middle of that mediation, and he's next to me, and I'm like grabbing him like, don't let me do this, you know, but that's just me. You see what I'm saying? So not only with your students, but with your parents as well. I mean, you know, you have to get to know them, especially the ones you're going to, you know, if you have a student that is in crisis a lot, I mean, following every crisis, it's a phone call home, or it's come in, let's sit down and talk about this, how can we help? So you got to be careful with adults or in social situations or whatever, so.
You know, and just to tag on to the end of that too, what I don't want you to come away from here thinking is, wow, I need to stay 3 feet away from everybody on the planet and not look them in the eye. Because guess what? For some of those parents that we have case conferences with, the first thing that I want to do with that parent when they walk through the door is make physical contact with them. Because for some of those parents, that's really meaningful to them. And the same thing for some of our students, okay? So what that really comes down to is knowing the person I'm dealing with. There's no replacement for that. I can't write a behavior plan for a student in one of your classrooms that has nearly the impact on that student that your relationship with that student does. It doesn't matter how, the best behavior specialist on the planet cannot write a behavior plan that is more important than you knowing that kid and having that relationship with that student. And that's how you'll know, is this a person that I need to just, you know, acknowledge as I walk in, or that I need to shake their hand, or they need a hug?
We have the privilege of seeing almost all of our teachers. And so our best teachers, our best staff are people that have relationships with kids. And this comes all the way from the top, and those of you that have been around Mr. Schneider know that he believes 100% that this is a relationship business. This is about building relationships first. And so, you know, our best staff are that way. And that's hard for some people. You know, some people, you know, have all this knowledge, and maybe very, very bright. And because they are, they expect that whatever they say to their students, that's the gospel. And that's not necessarily true. You may have a lot of knowledge. That's why the best teachers aren't always the people with the highest IQs. And I'm not saying you can't be a great teacher if you have a high IQ, but I'm saying some of our best teachers understand that, you know, the difference between teaching students with high IQs and teaching students that with lower IQs. Okay?
You know, we always want to do better. You know, I hope we never get to the place in education where we're doing good enough. I just don't ever want to be there. And about 2 years ago, I don't know if she'll remember this or not, but it was after the back to school meeting, and Jane Wilhelmus and I stopped in the hallway for a second at Castle High School, and how are you? How's it going? And I don't remember what the topic was, but for some reason, one of the things that the school corporation was working on a little bit was they were looking at sort of dropout. How do we keep kids in school? You know, how do we get kids to not quit school? How can we help them to finish graduating? And it's really easy to look at that and go, well, they don't want to be here. That, you know, that's their problem. Well, is it? And Jane looked at me when we had about maybe a 20-second exchange about that, and she looked me straight in the eye and she said, it's all about the relationship. Those kids that drop out, it's because they don't have a relationship. They've got, you know, that we can't affect that from some writ that comes out of the superintendent's office. That comes down to you. You know, being the hands and feet right in there with the kids and making those relationships. And man, I can't write a plan for that. I can't do that, but you guys do a beautiful job with that. And I think Ward County statistics, you know, are you know, pretty decent with that. But that relationship is just a really important thing. Nonverbal behaviors, we'll move on. Kinesics, body language, nonverbal messages transmitted by the motion and posture of the body. Just know that it means body language. Kinesics is body language. That's all you need to know. It's facial expression, gestures, postures, and movements. And then they tell us, discuss the signs of anxiety that participants observe in the individuals in your care. Well, let's talk about this. Think about the integrated experience. We talked about how what we do affects the students and how what the students do affects us. So let's just talk a little bit about facial expression, gestures, and postures, and movements. And then we'll talk about the students first. I want to do these out of order because a staff member's kinesics behavior can escalate or de-escalate a situation. We're going to come back to the kids in a second because that's the easy part. So tell me what you see, body language, facial expressions, body postures, all of that stuff that goes on. Tell me what you see people do that escalates behavior of other people with their body and facial expressions. What gives it? Crossing the arms? Absolutely. Anybody ever see this? Anybody ever do this? And it's okay to do that with a kid that you can do that with. You know, that I might be able to go, and the kid goes, I'm sorry. Well, that's probably not going to cause a crisis with that kid, right? But that's sending a signal. That's a nonverbal cue that I'm sending for another student. That might be a big problem that I do that. What else? Give me some more.
Hands on hips.
Hands on hips. This is my favorite. I have discovered that there are two hands on hips. Okay? All right? Okay? All right? There is the hands on hips, okay? And then there's the hands on hips. So now I watched a teacher do this here a couple months ago. I've been working on it in the mirror. Okay, it's the hand on hip with the head back and forth, but the head doesn't move. It goes like, can anybody do that? I practice in the mirror, I can't get my head to do it, right? But you know when they walk over and they go, oh no, you didn't. All right, which is the hand on the hip, head shake, so we got to get a new category for that. But yes, the hands on the hips are one. What else?
How many of you are eye rollers?
Yeah.
Yeah, you said glares, yeah, when you glare at them, right? But the eye roller, right? How many of you have seen one of your, you don't have to tell me who it was, how many of you have seen one of your coworkers give the eye roll or the eye roll sigh at a kid. Here he goes again.
How about at a parent in a conference?
Yeah. Ooh. How many of you have been in a conference where you thought you needed eye roll protectors? Keep the eyes down. No, let them roll up. I'm not going to roll my eyes right now. Good. Everybody's doing their best. What else? These are really good ones. Anything else? Here's my rule of thumb for you. They took this out of CPI, but my rule of thumb for you is this. Anything that you do that presents a student with a closed hand or a downward facing hand gives a student or another person the impression that you are trying to control them. Okay? So we don't very often go, hey, how are you today? I'm really excited you're here. Right? We don't do that. So my hand is closed. Okay? All right? You need to da-da-da-da-da. I see this all the time in classes. We don't even know we do it. Right? We come at kids like this. We give them this. We do this. All right? Now, pen. Right? Okay, good. Now, watch this. Just watch what happens when I go from this to this. That feels different, doesn't it? Okay? Because what do I really want to do for a person who's in crisis? I really want to stop the crisis. Because the last thing I want to do is cause the kid to attack somebody. Or me. I don't want to be the gasoline that was thrown on the fire that caused the kid to bite somebody or to attack me. Okay? But in that integrated experience, I need to understand that when we're going into crisis mode, I am the next step on the ladder towards the tantrum. Okay? And what I do can either help that child step off the ladder or take a step down, or it can help that kid go, oh yeah, let's go. Right? I have to make that decision. I have to decide right now through my body posture, through my distance, through my proximity, through my language, and we're going to talk about the verbal part of this all here in a minute. I have to make that decision about, am I de-escalating this kid right now? Am I helping to avoid a potentially dangerous situation for the student and for myself? Or am I moving that forward?
Throughout the day, you'll learn from my mistakes. And as a principal, when I got called to the ED room for a crisis, I would bust in the door, take off the tie, put my walkie-talkie down, put my badge on. What is that saying? What's it saying? Let's go. It's on. It's on. That was not very smart of me. You know, and I learned after a while, and this training, at this training I learned more about it, but if you think about it, and the lady that trained us said something I'll never forget: run to a crisis, walk in the door. Run to a crisis, walk in the door. It's a crisis, you need to get there, but when you're there, it's your job to bring that crisis down.
And you'll see that that's hard to do, and the more you do that, the better at it you'll get. At the beginning, you're not going to be good at this because you're just trying to survive, and the adrenaline's going, and you know, all of that stuff. But in our buildings where we have our ED classes, for example, I was actually, day before yesterday, I was at John H. Castle Elementary. I went into my office for about 20 minutes, and right as I was getting ready to walk out the door, the ED class called for the building principal. And it was beautiful because what that meant was they had a student in crisis, in restraint, and so we notified the building principal, and the building principal said, I'll be right there, put his stuff up, got ready, and just quickly moved right on down the hall. He didn't, he didn't get, he wasn't ready, he was going with a different reason. And he was going with the hopes of, I hope I can help, I hope I can contribute to the de-escalation of this behavior. He wasn't going with the intention of, I'm going to control this person. Because guess what? If you think about that, it's the only I'm not going to say very many behavior modification things today, but I will say this. If the only thing that's controlling a student is physical fear, then the only place that student's ever going to be controlled long-term is in prison. Okay? We don't change people with physical fear. We can control them with that, We don't change people with physical fear. Behavior modification is all about helping people to change, not just forcing control. Okay? All right. So we're going to jump up and talk about the nonverbal signs of anxiety we've observed with our students and or with parents. And I want you to think about also the physical body languages and things we get that we might use also when we're dealing with parents who might be in a crisis situation, who are very angry or very upset. All of these things apply to the same situation. Okay? Now let's talk about things we see from our students. And actually, they went over quite a bit of these already with Linda. So nonverbal behavior, what do we see when our students are getting really anxious? We've already talked about some of those. Throw them out again. What do you see them do? Cry, that's a physical thing, absolutely. What is it? Clapping, yeah, flapping, those autistic kinds of things, right? You may have a student who gets very physical, as you know, body tension, that sort of thing. Good. Somebody said pacing, you know, those kinds of things. Do you guys have any others you want to add to this? Because we kind of covered that earlier.
Head on the desk.
Yeah, putting my head down on the desk. We may see that going on.
I have a kiddo that will stretch and, I mean, I hate to say it, but kind of like act like a dinosaur.
Yep.
He'll get stretched out and, you know, that's the time I gotta go talk to him and calm.
I
You
can
know.
name that, I can name
You
that
know
student
the
in one
kid.
behavior, Bob. I'd name that too. Name that student. Ding. Right on. Yeah, so, but that's good. That's important that you know that you know what that student's going to, what are those physical signs. All right, we'll move quickly through the supportive stance. There we go. Now, notice that we talked about 3 feet and being about 3 feet apart, right? Let's bring, Mo, can you come up here for a second? And let's bring up somebody who is a little bit more height challenged. Let's bring you on up here. I don't know why they call it height challenged. This could be a gift. I mean, you don't walk into bars, you don't hit your head on things, right? Mo has to duck, those sorts of things. All right, so we've established that a good supportive way of dealing with a person is to stay about 3 feet apart, and he's a guy, so he might want to be just a little bit further apart than that. Now, a couple of things that we want to do. We want to talk about if Mo is dealing with you and you're in crisis. Okay, actually, let's turn you guys just a little bit. There you go. Okay, so you're the person that's in crisis, and Mo's, this is a good physical distance here. And there's just a couple of things that Mo wants to do here to tell you that he's not, you know, coming at you, because what we don't do this. All right, you may need to do that at some point, but we're not doing that right now. Okay, and so one of the things that you'll see in here is that we're going to kind of give the side of our body a little bit. So Mo, I'd like you to turn yourself about a 30-degree angle, just about right there. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Okay, one of the reasons for that is that it's giving Mo good support. If he needs to move any direction, he can move backwards quickly if he wants to. If I'm face on this way and I want to move backwards, that's a little bit harder for me to do. Just that out there. The Rock'em Sock'em Robots is not showing your age, Mo.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So he's got a little bit more mobility here. Second part of that, if I'm going to get hit on my body, ain't nothing on the front of me that wants to get hit. I'm not offering any of this up. If you're going to hit me, it's going to be over here somewhere or back here, all right? So if I need to move out of the way, I can move out of the way pretty quickly here. And the other thing is that it's less intimidating than a face-on. So it's very simple. It's about a 30-degree stance to the right. We're just going to do this way. And then you'll notice in this picture how the person's got hands up. And the idea here is how can I help you? I'm trying to help you get through this. So Mo, kind of give us a handout like this. We're going to be talking to the student like this. How can I help you to get through this situation? And that stance probably looks very different to you than, let's bring Mo back straight face on with her. And now take about 2 steps towards her for me. And bring your hands up this way. Turn them over. That way, that feels very different, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, the whole way. Woo! Gonna need a break soon. All right, good. Okay.
Before we jump off this slide, this information, you'll see again.
You will need to know this. So get your pencils out. What are the reasons for using the CPI supportive stance? All you need to know is respects personal space, non-threatening and non-challenging. Staff have an escape route that way, and it contributes to your personal safety. I want to make sure everybody gets those written down. Reasons for using the CPI supportive stance: respects personal space, non-threatening, non-challenging, contributes to staff's safety, and provides staff with an escape route. You might need to know that later on today. Then, hint.
And one of the things we didn't talk about that you will see again is what is the value in learning those crisis development behaviors by students and what our approach should be? What do you think are the values? This is more of a subjective answer on the test, but just throw out some things.
Safety.
Safety, yeah. Michelle, you think of other values of learning those?
You just put me on the spot, so I can't think.
Okay, anybody else?
You can shut down a crisis before it happens.
Absolutely, that's the goal. You know, a lot of people say, I'm going to restraint training. I'm going to restraint training. I'm going to, well, guess what? This isn't just restraint training. This is training to keep from the restraint. That's a better way of turning. Now, we're going to teach you some things this afternoon to keep you safe and to keep students safe. But this is about keeping you from that point. So that's DS, thank you, Matt. What a great word. Your wife must be a school psychologist.
Good news, I'm leaving. Things will go faster.
All right, thanks, Kelly. We'll get back on time schedule now. We're about 10 minutes behind. All right, what I need you to do, because I need you to put all pens and pencils down. And I need you to sit as still and as quiet as you can. Try not to make any noise. Hey, I said to sit still! Okay. What happened to your heart rate? Anybody? What happened? Tell me the physical reaction to that. 10. What else? You're an anyway. What else?
I flinched and jumped.
Flinched and jumped. Physical reaction. And we're going to talk about paraverbal communication. That is, I hope you never do that, by the way. That is how you say what you say. How we say what we say. The vocal part of speech. And you just heard volume. You heard tone. You heard cadence. It wasn't very good. It would be terrible in a crisis situation. All right? Because what are we trying to do? Relieve anxiety. Was any anxiety relieved when I screamed like that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right? The vocal part of speech. All right? So we talked about nonverbal, you know, the body gestures and things like that. We're going to talk about your tone, your volume, and your cadence. I have to really work on this because sometimes I want my coach voice to come out. All right? Or I'm at a Carly for not cleaning her room voice to come out. And I have to work really hard on my tone. And Linda and Kelly and those of you that sit in case conferences know the angrier I get or the more frustrated I get, what happens to my tone and volume, Linda?
You get louder and,
Yeah. I have to really take a big breath, bring it down, you know, and my tone and my volume and my cadence, I have to really work on. As far as tone goes, you want to try to avoid inflections of impatience, condescension, inattention. You know, and those of you that have been in an ED classroom at the elementary level, I would add sarcasm to this in your voice, okay? Because if you're dealing with an ED student that's calling you every name in the book, and I'm going to kick your butt, and you blah, 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 and you know, when he says, I'm going to kick your butt, and you say something like, yeah, right, that's not good. You know, that's not good use of voice. So you want to avoid those inflections of impatience, condescension, inattention. Pay attention to your tensions. When you are in a crisis, you cannot be thinking about grading papers. You cannot be thinking about your observation, your evaluation. You can't be thinking about anything else but getting out of that crisis. All right? I know for me it was very hard. I'm in the middle of a case conference. Linda calls me on the radio, says we have a restraint. I go into the room. I'm thinking about the conference. I'm thinking about evaluations. I might be thinking about whatever's going on at home, and that's not good. My attention needs to be with whatever's going on. Keep your volume appropriate for the distance and situation, okay? And those of you that are now middle school and high school people will probably look at me funny. We know what 12-inch voices are, you know, at the elementary level. You know, you can hear right here, especially if they have a crowd. Why would you want to do that? Because if they think they can get more attention by the peers around them, they're going to do that. So keep the conversation right here, okay? The cadence. Deliver your message using an even rate and rhythm. And there's a reason why they put this in here. What happens to your voice when you become anxious or nervous, anything like that? What happens to your voice? It may not be everybody. I know it happens a lot.
It's loud and shaky, we're trying to control it.
Yeah, loud and shaky. The other thing is your voice will crack a little bit when you're nervous or when you're anxious. And so you want to make sure that you think about these things in a crisis. It will be very hard the first time you're in one. And that brings me, we hired a program assistant at Oakdale, and she is great. She's still there, ED classroom. And the first time she had a restraint, she couldn't speak. She just stood there. She froze. I mean, it was pretty violent, but she froze. And she had control over none of these things. You need to have control over all of these things in a crisis to the best of your ability. Your tone, your volume, and your cadence. Okay? Any questions about that? All right, we are going to talk about verbal intervention now. And this is specific to the defensive stage. And you will see this again. When the student is defensive about something, whatever it is, the first thing you will see, or you might see, is questioning. Okay? And so in that bottom right-hand corner, you're going to write questioning on this. And there are two types of questioning. There's information seeking, and there's challenging. Give me an information seeking question. Anybody think of it?
When are we going to lunch?
When are we going? Man, that might be the most important information seeking question today, as soon as possible. That's good. Give me another information seeking question, too.
What time is this class over?
What time is this class over? Okay. Give me that same question, but I want you to make it challenging. You're defensive. You're going to challenge me now. You're going to challenge the teacher. Marilyn?
I want lunch now.
I want lunch now. Okay, can you put it in a question, though? The very same question you asked me. I think you said, what time is lunch?
Just say the same language.
Yeah, change your voice inflection.
What did I say?
What time is lunch?
What time are we going to lunch?
What time is lunch? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What time are we getting out of here?
What time are we getting out here? Different type of question. Good. So when you're in that defensive stage, or when a student is in it, maybe you are in a defensive stage, the questioning, one of the ways you can tell is in the questioning. You know, are they really trying to find out what time lunch is? Are they starting to get ticked off and they want to know? They're just asking to be competing. No, they're just asking because they're anxious or they're angry or whatever. Okay? That second phase in this defensive stage is refusal. Refusal. You know that they've escalated a little bit when you who are in authority ask them to do something and they won't do it. Okay, it's just a refusal. For example, Tip, I'm going to ask you something, and give me an example of a refusal in this situation. Tiffany, I need you to go to the nurse's office and get your medicine.
No, I'm not doing it.
Tiffany, I need you to go to the nurse's office and get your medicine. Luke, I need you to go down to the custodian's closet and get the food.
See,
Luke, I need you, yeah, different response here, no verbal from Luke. And that's probably your student, right, that you work with. It's not necessarily a verbal response, but it's a refusal and it's non-verbal. Kelsey, I need you to go over to your uncle's room and tell him what a great guy he is. He is a great guy. All right, so that refusal, they go from questioning to refusal, okay? And we're gonna make up some time here because I think a lot of this is common sense. The next thing is you might see a release of verbal reaction from the student, an emotional outburst, a loss of rationalization, blowing off steam, screaming, swearing, high energy output. All right, we're not at the point where we would use physical crisis intervention. And what we should do is allow that individual to let off steam. Okay. The second part, a lot of you have said previously, and I hope this is common sense, when you're in that situation in your classroom, you want to remove the audience. And especially for middle school, high school kids, because if you think that you are going to get a middle school or high school student to calm down and they're not thinking about their peers, you're wrong. They are absolutely thinking about their peers in this situation. And if they may perceive it as, if I calm down or I back off, that shows that the student is giving in. And you know middle school and high school kids, they don't want to give in. They don't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers, okay? So allow that individual to let off steam. Sometimes that's very hard because you're going to hear profanity, you're going to hear things about you, and you're going to get into that defensive mode. So that's where you being a professional and saying, okay, this student's irrational right now, I'm going to let them blow off steam. Okay. That fourth phase in the defensive stage is intimidation. And we don't get a lot of intimidation. They may try to intimidate us, but at the preschool, elementary levels, but middle school and high school, when the students are larger, you may get a lot of intimidation. It may not be physical yet, but you can get some intimidation. And Lindsay, how does your student try to intimidate you?
It's always, I'm gonna punch you in the face.
Okay. Good. All right. Any other examples? Luke, does your student try to intimidate you?
Maybe by facial expression, and he likes to throw things too sometimes, but.
Okay, more nonverbal from him. Correct, and he is less verbal than the student Lindsay works with. Mo, in that ED classroom at Castle North, do you get some kids that they may not try to intimidate you because you know you're a physically imposing guy, but what about Bree? Do they try to intimidate Bree at times?
A lot of it is the verbal abuse.
Yeah. What about anybody else? Life skills? You work in a life skills room. Do you have life skills students that will try to intimidate you? How?
Mine are all quite a bit smaller, so
Okay. Is it verbally, non-verbally?
I don't think I get that level of it there yet because they're so young that they're still in the phase of, they're the kid in the classroom.
Can you tell me why a life skills classroom may have less intimidation than an ED classroom?
Because the teachers are a lot bigger and more intimidating to them.
In some cases, but think about, what do we have in life skills classrooms? What are cognitive abilities? Yeah, the cognitive abilities, and that's just like for those of you that are in especially severe life skills class. Anybody in a severe life skills class? So one at Newburgh, one at Boonville Middle, one at
I was
Castle.
one last year, but.
Yeah. So when we have physical interventions in a life skills class, and it's hitting, guess how they hit? Just like this. It's not a punch. It's different, and it all has to do with the cognitive ability. Okay, and so it's a lot different. The types of physical crisis that we have in a life skills classroom, especially a severe life skills classroom, is a lot different. Okay, so intimidation, and when you have intimidation from a student, number one, you want to take all threats seriously. Okay, take all threats seriously. And this is the point where you want to seek assistance and wait for team to intervene. And until that point, you want to avoid a hands-on approach. How many of you work in a school that has a crisis team? Oh, that, I would say you do, or you did at one time. And maybe you do and you don't know it, that the people that have the radios, the principal, the homeschool advisor, the counselor, or whatever, a lot of times they know that if there's a crisis, they are going. And so it's been a couple years ago since the administrators have trained. But one of the things that we told them in their training was go back and have a crisis intervention team. But what you think, or what some people would think, the type of person you would want on that team, may not be actually what you want. Okay? You may think that the high school football coach, who's in great shape, would be a great person to have on that team. But why maybe that not be the best person to have on that team?
Because of their rough appearance.
Yeah, exactly. What are you looking for? What are you looking for?
Someone that can calm, compassionate.
Calm, compassionate, exactly. Now, it wouldn't hurt, especially at a middle school or high school level, to have a couple people that are Matt's size or Farrell and Moles. But if we have those people on our team, we want them to know their job is not to go in there and physically manhandle the situation. That's not their job. There may be some times when we need them to. And when I was at Oakdale, we had two ED classrooms there, and we had a crisis intervention team, and it was basically the homeschool advisor, counselor, social worker, middle school, high school, the principal, and then we also had a teacher. I don't know if you know Tim Long, but Tim is a male teacher at Oakdale, and he had the most calm voice of anybody I've ever been around. And the way he interacted with kids was great. And here's the other thing Tim did. During his plan period, not every day, but just every once in a while, he'd pop in that ED room and he would spend some time in there. And that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, establishing that rapport and that relationship prior to ever having to do that. And Matt, I'm sure as your Dean of Students at St. John's, which is a different role than we have within the corporation, do you have some of the same types of things?
Yeah, I constantly am walking into classrooms and checking to see what kids are doing and having them show me what success, what their successes, their stickers and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, and establishing that type of rapport and relationship with kids beforehand makes that crisis go a lot better. Okay. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about tension reduction and that therapeutic rapport. And so they've escalated to the point, I don't like this being over here, I think that should be way up here, intimidation, and now they're starting to come back down, a drop in energy which occurs after every crisis situation. I'm going to give you a bad example of what to do in therapeutic rapport, what we call processing. We have a student at Boonville High School. He's one of my favorite students of all time. I felt like I had a good rapport with him. And we had a crisis in Linda's classroom. It was when she was still at Oakdale. And so I go into the classroom, guess what? It's over. So it was good timing for me. So I think, okay, I'm going to go up and talk to this kid. And so I walk over, and we have a great rapport. I mean, I take this kid out to lunch when he meets certain goals, and I know his family real well. And so I go like, hey, you doing okay? And I bend down. So first of all, I haven't given good proxemics. I physically touched a student that I know really doesn't like to be touched. But I did it out of compassion. I mean, hey, you doing okay? and he hit me right about there, and it was a pretty good sized sixth grader. It was when we still had sixth graders at the elementary school. I mean, he caught me good. And he went from, and I wish that crisis development model, he went from that therapeutic rapport right back up to acting out like that. And I caused it because I didn't mean to. I just went up to talk to him and see if he was all right. And boy, that's where knowing your student, and I knew him. And so you have to be really careful during that therapeutic rapport period, that processing period, that you make sure that you don't do something to cause that student to escalate again, okay? Now, that's an example of physical aggression, and this continuum is really about the verbal, okay? This is a verbal continuum, okay? Any questions about that? Somebody asked about setting limits. And there are 3 criteria to setting limits. And the first would be, make them simple. Make them clear.
The next, understanding precipitating factors can help staff to, when you understand these things, it can actually prevent acting out behavior by being proactive. So if you're sympathetic to some of these things that are going on, it can, help keep them from escalating. Recognize that we are seldom the cause of acting out behavior. A lot of times we think we take kids' behavior personally. And, and they try to pull you into that at times, but we can't allow ourselves to take it personally and to understand that it really probably has little to do with us and a lot to do with all of that other stuff that's going on in our life. And then, number 3 is a big one. We have to avoid becoming a precipitating factor ourselves. So we can become one of those reasons why the kid blows up. Just that integrated experience. Remember that how we react is going to affect how they react. And I think that's what the next slide is. Possibly, maybe not. Okay, rational detachment. This is the ability to stay in control of one's behavior and not to take acting out behavior personally. That's really tough when you've got a kid spewing all over you, cursing at you, calling you every name in the book, threatening you. Really hard not to get defensive and not to take it personally. Remember that staff may not be able to control precipitating factors, but they can control their own responses to the acting out behaviors that result. You can do that by maintaining a professional attitude. And here's a good one. Find positive outlets for negative energy absorbed during a crisis. I can tell you that when you go through a crisis situation and you actually have to get to the physical, nonviolent intervention that we're going to talk about this afternoon, it is tolling. I mean, it's physically and emotionally completely draining. When we would have to restrain a student, I would be exhausted the rest of the day. And I would be in Tad's office that afternoon crying. I mean, I would be in tears. And that was just my release. I had to release it. I had to have some way. I'd go home and talk to my husband and, be with my kids, and whatever it is that you need to do for yourself to kind of release, you need to make sure and take that time. And sometimes it's in the middle of the day and you have to take a break. And in an ED classroom, you don't get breaks. You're on from the time you're there. You have planning period with your kids in there a lot of times. You have lunch with your kids. You don't get breaks. But we would find ways with our staff when we had a crisis that he was real good about getting somebody from another room to help us so that we could get some time to kind of decompress. So what are some ways that you guys, maybe not even in a crisis, but just your day, the stress of the day, that you can kind of calm yourself, find that way to rationally detach? Anybody have any examples of what they do?
Just stepping out of your room to talk to another adult, to talk to another teacher.
Yeah, sometimes you crave adult attention, interaction, especially if you have the little ones. Like, I need to talk to an adult. Anybody else?
Read a book to the class.
Read a
Get your
book?
mind off of it and into the book.
Okay.
It's going to be very important for those of you that are in ED classrooms or work with kids like Lindsay does, Luke, life skills classrooms. When you have this daily or weekly, that you remember two things, and you can use the mnemonic device Q-tip. Quit taking it personally. Quit taking it personally. That's tip number one. Tip number two is
I've never heard that. That's good.
You have to have something, either at school or somebody, that you can vent to a little bit about this. Because those of you that have restraints every day, if you need that release, it's exactly what Linda was talking about. And I wrote down some things when I was taking this class. At home, for some people it's music. At the end of the day, maybe in your own classroom, turning on your music, getting out your iPhone and turning music on, walking the dog, exercising, at work, sound machines. During the crisis, breathing, self-talk, asking for help. But all those things will help you rationally detach from what is going on. Does that make sense? You have to have something. I've heard Linda say before, she drives a convertible, at the end of the day, in the spring, the top's down, and she's not thinking about any restraints that went on that day. For me, in the spring, I'm able to coach softball, and so for 3 hours at night, I'm not thinking about special ed, except when Tiff was on my staff, and I'd get there and she'd start asking questions, or on our staff again. And so, but you need that release. If you're dealing with crisis all the time or stress, you need that release outside of school, whatever that is for you. And I'm not so sure I know it's not just related to crisis situations. I tell people all the time, they tell me they're stressed, they're overwhelmed. I said, duh, you're in education. We're understaffed. We have too many kids. Our caseloads are too high. Our class numbers are too large. We work our prep through our lunches. Our prep periods are spent on the phone, not grading papers, talking. We're all there. And whether it's my job or a teacher's job or a program assistant's job, you're in education. You're going to be overwhelmed. You just are at times, so you need this type of release.
Okay, and we touched on this a lot, integrated experience. The concept that behaviors and attitudes of staff impact the behaviors and attitudes of those in their care and vice versa. So it says individuals do not act in a vacuum. Their behavior affects staff and vice versa. So basically what it's showing you, again, is our levels here. And our positive approach to that will not escalate the person's behavior. So the student is in anxiety level, we're gonna give the positive approach of being supportive. This is all for, you've already written that down, so. The defensive, you know, we're gonna be directive. The acting out person, the nonviolent physical crisis intervention, and then the tension reduction, the therapeutic report. So all of those positive actions that we can utilize so that the student does not escalate further.
Okay? Ways to control fear and anxiety, and this is why I asked you this question. What makes you afraid? For me, it's hurting kids. Man, and as many restraints as I've been in, I don't think we've ever had a kid hurt. But boy, wouldn't that be terrible? You know, that you're in a restraint, you're not doing anything wrong, it's what you're going to be taught this afternoon, and you hurt a kid. That would, oh man, that would bother me. That's what I'm most afraid of. And then today you're learning techniques to protect both ourselves and the students. What we're learning today is great stuff. And hopefully you learn more from what we've learned about verbal intervention this morning than you ever have to use what we're doing this afternoon. Okay? Use a team approach. Don't respond alone. And man, ED classrooms, life skills classrooms, they have to work together, because you might have one program assistant, Brent, taking the kids out of the classroom while the other two are in a restraint. Okay? Lindsay's in a tough situation. She's in a room at Work Ed Center with a student, and she's providing the academics, and Mr. Girth is close, and Mr. Warner's close, but she doesn't have anybody in there with her. And she's doing a great job of providing the education for the student in that situation. But boy, I'm nervous about her being by herself. You know, that bothers me. Learn physical intervention techniques, and that's what we're going to do this afternoon. Okay, is we're going to learn some things to keep you safe, and then when we're actually in a restraint, how to not hurt a student. Okay.